you.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, we have the meeting recorded as well. Okay. Is the cursor? I'm sorry about the hiccup. The mouse is just weird. So this is a device that we all know and probably have too. It provides various different functions, from communication to taking photographs, reading, shopping, and whatever we want to do with it. But it's not always we think what really goes into making this phone. Well, it turns out there are more than 60 different materials that need to be mined to actually make this phone and make it a smartphone. So these materials are mined in like different parts of the world, from Canada, Australia, Brazil, China, Kazakhstan, and all of them are distributed so that they reach one central location for manufacturing components and then assembled and then redistributed back into the world for consumption. And after a while, like we may probably use it for like 2 or 3 years, and then it either becomes outdated, not functional, and it could as well stay in your drawers, or it could be sent for e-waste recycling. And at many times it just ends up as trash. This is not just the case with smartphones, but with like every product that we use, from clothes to all the household goods and appliances, to buildings when they're constructed and then demolished, and then even the simpler things like simpler and low value things like packaging. All of these things in the end, they end up as waste in a garbage truck in many parts of the world. So it was the sight of this garbage truck, landfill, and litter that really prompted me to understand what's the system that creates this waste and what's the way out of it. Now, when you see all these products, what we really see is that all the materials that go into it really starts with resource extraction and flows into production, into distribution, consumption, and then disposed. So when you see the flow of materials through this process, it's really linear. And that gives the name for this system. A current system of consumption, production, consumption, and disposal is linear in nature, and we call this the linear economy. Now think about this for so many products and so many people in the world. To really feed this growing population and the need for all products, we have to assume that Earth has infinite resources to start with that we can extract, and an infinite regenerative capacity of the Earth at the other end when things are dispersed. Several studies have really accomplished that both these assumptions are false, and we really need to operate within planetary boundaries, and we need to stay within the Earth's carrying capacity. So these are the resource flows that we're talking about, which flows linearly from extraction all the way until disposal. And we have really started doing this ever since the Industrial Revolution, and that's really fast track. Since the last few decades, the economic growth has been tremendous, but so have been the associated ecological impacts. The United Nations has given a warning about the triple crisis facing humanity right now. And that's the interlinked and cascading effects of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. While the economic growth and the prosperity associated with that is good and desirable, but we really need to think, is this the best we can do? Can we rethink how materials flow through our system? Are there ways in which we can sustainably manage resources? So what I'm going to talk today is really about rethinking these resource flows. And when we talk about resource flows, it's just anything which we do like every day. Like this morning when I just had my shower, to when I had my breakfast, and even my transportation getting to the library. So resource flows are what we interact with every day. It's present everywhere. But where it's really present and abundant and setting an example is in nature. So natural systems are you could say, the perfect model for resource flows and sustainable resource management. And there are 3 principles from natural systems that we can learn to know how to really manage these resources instead of the linear fashion that we have been used to all this while. So the first principle is resource cycles. This is the familiar water cycle where water, when evaporates, condenses into clouds, precipitates back again, and then joins back a water body to complete the water cycle. Same is true for every other resource or element in nature that you can think of: phosphorus cycle, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle. And even if you think of any phenomena in nature, it's all part of one cycle. It's all part of some cycle and is really a part of a system. So the first principle that we can learn from nature is that resources flow in cycles. And now powering all the resource cycles, either directly or indirectly, is the energy of the sun. This is renewable and obviously been around for billions of years. So the second principle that we learn from the natural system is that we need to power our systems with energy from renewable sources. Now, the third aspect of it is the idea of waste equals food. Now, when we think of a tree, when the fruit, leaves, flowers fall, it decomposes, it falls near the tree, disintegrates and decomposes back into the soil, thereby enriching it and helping the tree grow. So moving away from the tree, we can also see like the complex network of organisms that make up the food web. So the waste of one organism actually becomes nutrient for another, which is in the case of excretion from animals. And also when different organisms die, they are decomposed and become a part of the cycle again. So in this way, nutrients are metabolized throughout and in different parts of the natural system. And that really gives the third and the most important principle of waste equals food. And talking this way about natural systems and also in the beginning, telling about how impactful the linear economy is, may seem like humans are really like the bad guys, the ones who are fit into the system just to disrupt it. But no, that's not the case. Humans are very well a part of the system as well. For the simplest example, take the example of composting. So when we eat food, and the scraps in the preparation of the food can actually go into feeding chickens, and the excreta from chicken and other organic material can be turned into compost that goes back into the soil to grow healthy plants, and which again comes back to as food. So this is an example of a resource cycle with human activities in it. So that is complete. So we know things like that are possible. We just have to make it happen. Now, when we come to the idea of waste equals food, that really means designing out waste. So the reason we have waste in the first place now is that a lot of products are really designed for the dump without really knowing what goes into it and how it should be managed at the end of its usage. So designing out waste means consciously making the effort to design out waste from products, processes, and systems so that there is no such thing as waste. And to really do that, it needs to be separated into biological and technical materials. So this was an idea which was propagated by an American architect, McDonough, and German chemist Braungart, in their book, Cradle to Cradle, in which they talk about nutrient flows, which are essentially materials, but that flow in closed loops and end up from cradle to cradle instead of a grave, which is a landfill. And when we see this, they separate into two distinct categories of materials. One is the biological materials. Biological materials are all those that have a plant or a biological origin. So we can extract raw materials from them, from the biosphere, make it into products that is consume it. And then at the end of its useful life, those products made of biological materials can go back into enriching the biosphere, thereby closing the cycle. On the other hand, we have the technical materials. Technical materials are all those that have a human activity associated with the raw material extraction, and also synthesis. So a couple of examples of synthetic materials are technical materials are plastics and other synthetic materials, as well as minerals and metals that we mine from ores. So the technical materials need to be in a cycle of manufacturing, using, reusing, and in a way that it's returned back to a system such that it's not leaked back into the biosphere in a way that it pollutes it. So this is a system of biological materials and technical materials. But here lies the challenge. We do know that all our products don't have just biological materials like paper, cotton, or made of just technical materials like aluminum or just plain plastic. A lot of the products that we use are a mix of both. So what's a solution for this? And that's really the place where design plays a key role. So it's by designing out waste and designing products to be easily disassembled, materials to be easily recovered, that we actually keep both these loops separate and enable them to close the loops. And when we do like this, like when materials flow in closed loops and they always have some value, what we are really doing is preserving the product and material value. So when we come to think of it, a product or a material is really considered waste when it has no value. So by having the biological and the technical cycles in which there are different activities that always maintain and preserve the value of the materials that flow through it, we actually are preserving the value. And there is never a point where it becomes waste. And the strategy to preserve product and material value is really based on two simple ideas. One is slowing loops, and the other is closing loops. So what slowing loops does is extends the useful life of products. So think of it as the time when you could repair your mobile phone when its screen got shattered, rather than having to replace the phone or shove it into a drawer. So that is slowing loops. And another one is also when we have products that are easily upgradable. Like, again, coming back to the example of a mobile phone. What if your phone is made of components or modules that can be upgraded as we need? Like, say you want a better camera or the processor is outdated. So this is the idea behind a phone manufacturer company called Fairphone. So Fairphone really follows this idea of slowing the loops by making sure that their products are upgradable and that they last longer. So this means giving consumers and other businesses the ability to repair, to refurbish, retrieve components, to refurbish, and to remanufacture products. So that is one idea of slowing loops. And the second one is closing loops. So what closing loops does is it extends the useful life of materials. So back again to the mobile phone example, say we have phones from 5 years ago, 10 years ago that have just been collecting dust in the drawers. there is still material value left in them, though the product may no longer be functional. So how do we extend that useful life? That means we put those devices back into the system where the materials can be recovered so that loops can be closed. One of the most widely used strategy for closing loops, and one that's widely accepted and we have some sort of system for, is recycling. So for the last 15 to 20 minutes, we have really been talking about how to rethink resource flows rather than a linear system into something that's more circular. And putting this all together, that is the three principles of mimicking natural regenerative systems, designing out waste, and preserving the product and material value, really gives the whole idea of a circular economy. And what you may have just noticed now is also that we've been talking all this while without even using the term circular economy. And that really goes to show that all these strategies and ideas are not new. They have been around, they've been implemented in some places, but they all need to come together. So this is a diagram which you can actually just ignore, but you may come across it if at all you are reading more on the circular economy. So this diagram just puts together all the different things that we talked about. The biological and the technical cycles of material, and also the different activities that contribute to closing the loops. And this concept is popularized by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And they really propose a circular economy, in quotes, as a circular system where the value of products, materials, and resources is retained within the economy for as long as possible. So this is the vision of the circular economy. And the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is an organization, is a nonprofit organization based in the United Kingdom, who have really taken it upon them to promote and advance this idea of circular economy and to help businesses and governments transition to a circular economy. And to do so, they have a lot of strategic partners. And here are just a few, and so many of these would be familiar to you. So there's IKEA, like furniture, and there are product brands, and there are governments and city councils that are all strategic partners for the network. And that's really because to achieve such a vision of a circular economy, it's not just about one business or one product operating independently. It needs to come together as a system. And all this while we were talking about material flows, we've been talking a lot about products, especially because that's where materials really go to. And that's at the product level where there is circular flow of resources. And if we go to the next one at the business level, so that gives a lot of business value for the way we think and manage resources. And that's being realized by a lot of companies and in the US as well as in the European Union. And the European Union has really taken a leadership position in transitioning to a circular economy because they have policies for supporting that. And so that actually brings me to the ecosystem part of the circular economy. So for the business to operate, it needs to partner with other stakeholders, other key partners, to be able to get back the products and materials into their system. So those are the different service providers and different recycling firms that supply the products back. So when we see the circular economy, there are three different perspectives. So one is at the product level, the second is at the business level, and the third is at the ecosystem level. And that means that we need to look at the whole system. We need to see how things are connected to each other, how products are connected, how they are used, what are the materials that go into it, and also how it fits within the entire system in which we live in. And our systems can be said to comprise of literally three parts of the economy, the environment, and the society. Though the circular economy is, from an economic perspective, motivated by the environmental impact, it really isn't standalone because there are complex interconnected relationships between the three. And to really understand that, well, actually, the way I understood that was when in the winter of 2019, and when I visited India, I was studying the waste management situation back home in my hometown. And that was when I realized that waste, though it's an environmental problem there as well, it's very tightly linked to the economy and the society. So there's a class of people who really derive their livelihood out of waste. So they are the waste pickers and the informal sector workers. And the work that they do, again, impacts the environment and the economy. So this is just one of my experiences that really made me realize how interconnected and so tightly connected all these three systems are. And intervention in any one system really has repercussions on everything else. So to transition to a circular economy, when we think of a product, we don't look at it in isolation. We look at it as a part of a system. So for example, if you see, like these days, you see a lot of a rise in like bio-based or plant-based packaging material. That is a great material innovation, yes. But is that enough to make sure that the material loops are closed? No, that's because we really don't have systems in place in a way that would close those loops. So many biomaterials like bio-based plastics really need an industrial composting system to put them back. And do we have that here in Blacksburg? No. Do we have that wherever you're from? Maybe, maybe not. But we see those materials like coming into the market more frequently these days. And what happens at the end of it, it again ends up as waste. So innovations like these are important, but they need to be connected to the system in which they're working. And that really means that singular solutions like these don't really work. And we need to look at systems change. So to kind of summarize all that we're talking about is that the linear flow of resources that follows the route of take, make, and waste can be changed if we rethink how materials flow through our system. How can they circulate? How can they be circulated back into the system so that we take less, maybe even make less to satisfy the human consumption, and definitely waste not. And to really make that happen, we are having a systems change ahead. And that means rethinking how products are made, how are they disposed, rethinking if we need a product or do we need a service provided by the product, and also rethinking what are the changes that we need to make in the system in order to achieve this vision. So circular economy may not, actually circular economy is not a trend, it's not a buzzword, it's something that's an inherent part of the system, and it's something that is a vision that we need to work towards. So I strongly believe that the concept of the circular economy is here to stay, though it may take that phrase or not, though the concept of sustainability or circular economy may be trending and be buzzwords, but the underlying ideas, the key principles that we talked about are really what drives the system to be something in which there is no waste. So yeah, so that's like the introduction part of the, like the most of my talk, but I left it a lot of time so that we can have more of a conversation with people in the room and those online about certain questions about the circular economy that they would have, and whether you were able to like understand the what, why, and how from what I spoke now. So thank you. Is there a Yes, I do. So the question from the room was for those online.
I have a question. I have a question.
Yeah, just a bit. We'll finish the one in the room and get back.
Okay.
Yeah, so about a project that I'm working on in the circular economy. Right now, I'm studying how furniture is reused inside Blacksburg by the student community, and what are the different means and platforms through which they reuse that, and why it goes to waste, and why some things go to waste while other things are being reused. So there's like a big disconnect between the supply of reusable items and the demand for reusable items. So I'm looking at the role of digital platforms that can bridge the gap, along with studying it in the local context. So that would also mean including studying the role played by the local thrift stores and things like Habitat for Humanity, Goodwill. So all of these are part of the system that really can ensure that furniture is locally reused within our community to the extent it's possible, because we do have limitations on the product. So is there like things we can do better with the current system that we have? So that's my current project right now for my master's thesis. Rebecca, you had a question?
Yeah. I can see how this whole movement decreases our use of raw materials because it's recycling materials. But I'm just wondering about the part plays about the ideas of human consumption, because we already consume so much, and most of it, as you say, goes into waste. I mean, look at thrift shops and clothing stores. The huge amounts of things that people keep buying that they're, you know, sort of seduced to buy because they're being produced, so somebody can make a whole bunch of money somewhere. So I'm wondering about the whole notion of, rather than this whole system being within an anthropocentric value system, which keeps serving humans, where the shift to the ecocentric view, which means no central thing gets served. The nature gets served by these processes just as much as humans do, if not more. So that would mean the understanding of curbing human, you know, addiction to material goods.
Yeah, you actually bring up really valid points and more nuanced aspects of the circular economy about human consumption. And totally true about the anthropocentric view of how the linear economy has been, and how that has been kind of like the origins for the idea of a circular economy. But that's not the only case. There are several evolving ideas and implementations of actually transitioning from an anthropocentric to an ecocentric view of the system. And one of the ways in which it's implemented in a circular economy, especially in the case of designing out waste, is using the principles of eco-design. And that really means rethinking in terms of the function of not just how a product would serve the human, but also where it comes from and where it goes and how it interacts with other things. So yeah, we should be making the shift towards something that is less anthropocentric, and a circular economy could be a means to do that. Yeah, but those are like the more nuanced aspects in terms of consumption. And also, one of the possible limitations, and maybe you could even say like an unintended consequence of a circular economy system, which many experts have been warning about, is really the idea of overconsumption. So there needs to be like checks and other behavioral interventions built into the system that could tackle those issues. So when we look at things from a systems perspective, and that's not just in terms of the humans, but also in terms of the environment. So we are going beyond just the society and the economy and looking at it from with an environmental perspective. Then we can build in those checks or those interventions into the system in a way we can tackle like consumption issues.
Yeah.
Does that address your comment?
Yes. Thank you.
Welcome. And thank you. That is a very great addition to this discussion. Yeah, Jonathan.
Thanks for the fun talk. Could you go to the slide that showed the linear economy we currently have? Near the beginning, I think.
Yes.
Can the people on Zoom hear me, or should Viverjita repeat what I'm saying?
Can any of you share the questions in the room? Okay, I can repeat, but I'm sorry about this.
Viverjita, none of us on the Zoom can hear what was said. Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, actually, like Dr. Boriko wanted to know about the linear economy, and I was just going to go back to the slide. Navigation is like, oops, but I'll move that.
I was thinking something about this. It seems like the economy matters a lot, like in terms of like the cost value of these things.
Yeah.
Because for things that are currently very expensive to extract, like power and water,
Mm-hmm.
we are pretty good at making it circular. For example, a power plant, you recycle all the steam back to the pump station that are using it, water valuable.
Yeah.
And then if you have an over excess of power being generated, we turn the power plants off. So that way basically all the power we make is actually getting used. So it seems like the main problem is the materials you're talking about, the resource extraction of, you called it what was it, biological materials?
Yeah, and technical. Yeah.
The problem is we haven't really hit into this constraint yet of the assumption that the resource is being challenged. So in the mid 20th century, two economists made a bet. One said, because we have less stuff than ever, that's not renewable, more people than ever, the cost of these ores and gases is going to keep going up and up and up because we have less stuff and more people. The other economists bet the price would go down, adjusted for inflation. Yeah. Because our engineering and technology have gotten so innovative that we can get it out so cleverly that it outpaces the constraints of the lack of resources. And so far, that second economist has won the bet. So the actual cost of stuff, of non-renewable stuff, is actually cheaper now to extract than it was with far fewer people and far more stuff. Yeah. And so I guess to me, I think a lot of the motivation to drive this, besides virtue is always a great thing, is are there any studies or information on when the inflection point will happen, where the innovation to bring extraction cheaper is finally outpaced by the lack of stuff left and the number of people to make it more expensive? Like when will the scale tip to this constraint of non-infinite resources actually becoming a problem economically? Okay. Sorry.
Oh no, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, for those online, the question here in the room from Dr. Boriko was that when do we reach the limits of the linear economy? Like what is the tipping point in which you can no longer extract resources? So when does that happen? So was that right?
Yeah,
kind of
I guess
when and why?
The
Left side.
I think the right side we're seeing in terms of climate change. It's more the left side. When will resources actually get more expensive to extract?
Oh, more expensive. Okay. Yeah. So when do well, in terms of the monetary cost, they are still cheap, but there was a study called The Limits to Growth by researchers at MIT, in which they had an economic model to show that we are above the carrying capacity of the earth. So how that translates into the cost of extraction and how much that would be, it's actually really material dependent. But several economists and decision makers have really come to understand and support this idea that the Earth's resources are finite. So in that sense, what they're really trying to do is keep like some of the materials as critical raw materials. And that is, well, if you come back to like the example of the cell phone, out of the 60 materials, like at least 10 of them are classified as critical raw materials. So they are in short supply to really meet the demands of the Earth. So that's in terms, so the example I'm giving is for the mobile phone and things that go into like microprocessors and chips. And I think some of you may really be aware of like the fluctuating cost these days, especially for things with like bigger equipment and stuff with chips and microprocessors, because of supply chain disruptions due to COVID is one. And the other is also some of these critical raw materials really like running low on supplies, and many governments feel the need to stop extracting them so that they could at least have some sort of a reserve. So yeah, we are not at the limit for all the materials, but we are slowly getting there. So it's not too late, but we really need to take action now. Exactly, it's too late. Yeah. Yep.
Take gold for example. Mining that's necessary to extract gold, which has become terrific to the extent of the amount of waste produced in chloride, and a number of other methods are approaching that. And so they're becoming, I think some of them are becoming, well, they are becoming more expensive. And I think that's becoming more, and even more generally, the amount of waste that we produce is just, in some economies, certainly, even in very poor countries, the amount of waste produced can be overwhelming. So there's so depending on how you define your tipping points, I think certain places we already have.
Yeah, so that was a good point. But can I have your name, please? Your name? Okay. So Markita had made this point about how we have kind of passed the tipping point for waste for certain materials. And that, just to add on to that, and the example of gold that you just gave, it really costs less to extract or to recover gold from like the processor and the chips of like old mobile phones than really extracting it from the ore. And that gives the idea of like urban mining. So in terms of the economics, like extracting virgin materials in many cases are becoming increasingly expensive as opposed to recovering them from the waste that's already there. But going forward, we really need to have a system in which we don't have the waste, because it's again more expensive to actually go to an urban mine, which is a closed landfill, and try to recover materials from that. That still has like its impacts associated with it. So that's a whole idea of why and how quickly we need to transition to a system where we have designed out the waste. Yep. Maybe we could come there.
It's going to be a very short question this time. Sorry. So besides recycling and learning how to compost, what can we as individuals do right now to help us in this things that you're trying to grow here?
Yeah. Okay. So Dr. Boriko's question was actually, I think, it can be like a takeaway from this talk, is that how we all as individuals can take part or contribute to a circular economy. Well, yes, recycling really is how we have gotten started on this. Though there are news and things that say that the recycling system is broken, which in a lot of cases it is, but it has to be fixed. And to fix that, we need to feed it back into with the materials that we need. So just because some news or media says that recycling system is broken doesn't mean we should stop recycling. That and composting, obviously, and those are the two things that Dr. Boriko mentioned. Well, other things is at the individual level, the way we use products. So those two ideas of using products for longer and closing the loops. So there it comes using products for longer. So that means like buying, purchasing, or receiving goods that are of good quality that you can use for longer. And at the end of its life for you, maybe you no longer have a use for a piece of well-made chair, but someone else might have. So that means the individual decision at that point is responsible for for making sure that the product actually lasts longer. And when it lasts longer, we avoid the impact associated with manufacturing of another, like a new product. So reuse is one. So this, so for all of us who are familiar with the waste management hierarchy, reuse, reduce, recycle, yeah, they do fit into the circular economy, but the waste management perspective really just looks at the end of life. So we need to also look upstream, like how we buy, where we buy. And also like there are a lot of businesses that are employing these kind of models. So supporting them would mean that they have more chance to grow and make an impact and actually help transition. And when I was talking about the example of Fairphone has a pretty low market share, even in the Europe, but they still continue doing it. And that's really because they want to show that it's possible that to have products that last longer, to satisfy human needs, at the same time, not having so much impact that we have, and to be responsible about all that we are doing. So one of their mission is to make sure like bigger equipment manufacturers actually take a look at them and try to implement some of the principles that they have been doing. At least as a first step is to make your phones and laptops more repairable. And that really has a huge movement, especially in the United States, for like the right to repair.
So wouldn't that make it so that the capitalist exploitative profit margin gets written out of the system?
Actually not. There really is business value in like more responsibly and in different ways of managing the materials. So more recent studies on like repair and refurbishment of electronic devices especially have showed that because of having such activities, there is more economic opportunity for more people to participate in the system. And there's also like better profit, which doesn't come from selling new products, but really from taking care of products that are already in use. So that's a question of, I hope that answered your question about the profit margin.
It did. It did. It was great.
So a lot of people go and buy a mobile phone. No one has thought about a process where they can reuse the old phones, like in terms of value models, using them like using it in terms of camera, so that you can see who is basically entering into your perimeter of the house, or like in terms of smartphone. People can use their old mobile phones in that. All they need is a bunch of camera and they need a microphone, which nowadays every phone has it. But no one has thought about that process. It would be better the companies coming to that process and more about that instead of throwing the phones away and then going to recycling. And in terms of recycling, almost half of the vehicles do not be recycled. They tell that this particular thing cannot be recycled because this is not material, so we need to. So instead of that, they can go and use it. There are a lot of apps that can do it now, but that has to be like an initiative from the mobile manufacturer. If it comes from a mobile manufacturer, it will have a larger impact than coming from a developer, from an individual developer at that point.
I chime in on?
Oh, yes, Jen. Mhm.
Okay, I don't know if it's helpful for the person.
Yeah, I think we can actually, or we could use this. Maybe you could just come here. That's better. You don't want to be sound and other.
Okay, where's the microphone?
You can hear it. I mean, it's part of the computer. So.
Okay. Hi. So two things. One thing on your question on what we can use as an individual for this problem. I don't know if you heard of Buy Nothing, the Buy Nothing movement. Okay, so they're basically all localized and it's a gifting economy. So it's like instead of you take your stuff to the thrift store, there's a network where you can say, hey, I have these things I don't want, I can gift them. Or hey, I need these things, can anybody offer? So it's a very direct, like a gift and offer of specific items. And that's huge for reducing waste and building community. And we have two locally, one East Group and one West Group that you can consider looking into. It's been, for me personally, I've been able to get rid of so much stuff knowing that it's going to someone that's going to use it. Instead of taking it to the thrift store, it may have a second life or it may just go to the landfill. Because I feel a lot of times when it goes to the store, I've seen them just turn around and toss my stuff away. Because they might think that it's not going to have as good of a shelf life compared to other things. So that's one thing. As far as the mobile phone goes, there actually are organizations that take old phones to repurpose them, like down in the Amazon, they take old phones to set up like monitoring networks for poachers. So there actually are places that repurpose like older phones. I think the question is like how widely known in the public sphere that there are places for these things. So instead of just tossing them, or waste recycling them. So they can have a second life. Yeah. It definitely would help if the manufacturers that are creating these products that have a framework in place that helps for these products to go to where they need to go instead of in the landfill. That's definitely the best situation. But sometimes as consumers, what you're going to do is advocate and then do your part in your community. I think the Buy Nothing movement is pretty amazing on multiple fronts. And the more we talk about it, the more in the community you can share resources. They know. It's on Facebook.
I can send out a follow-up.
Yes, or just, or post it. I don't know if you posted it on Sustainable Blacksburg recently. If not, that would be worth doing. You'd be surprised at stuff that people give away. Like someone's like, I have potato peels. I'm like, oh, we'll take it. I'll feed my chicken. So like something as small as that. Like I had some broken stuff. I know you took it to the thrift store. They're gonna throw it away. I'm like, I have this beautiful box, but the hinge is broken. Anybody want to give it a shot? And people are like, yes. So it's pretty amazing, and you can make a lot of new friends, get to know your neighbors and such. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hi.
I just like, okay, so the example which Jen was giving about the Buy Nothing group also again really illustrates the importance of like the society, the economy, and the environment. So this is like local example. And another thing about the circular economy transition is the idea of a hyper local circular economy. When similar to how like we have food systems, local food systems that could satisfy to some extent the needs of the local community, it also goes to like the products. And like Buy Nothing group is like a great example of that, which interlinks different parts of the system. And not many people know about it. And that is also what a challenge that we have now is the communication. So we have all these different parts of the system, but they are not connected. So communication is really a major channel which can get together different partners, different stakeholders to ensure that we have like a circular system in which we live in. Anne had something to add.
Hi, I just wanted to add to what Jen said about the Buy Nothing. This morning, somebody picked up a piano bench from me and they had posted because they had gotten a piano that had no bench and I had inherited a piano bench that had no piano. So somebody just got that from me today. And I volunteered at a local thrift store, so I definitely believe in that too. But the whole of it really helps get a lot of things to new homes. I also wanted to mention that we're right now doing a 21 Actions for 2021 campaign. It's on our website, it's on our Facebook page, and actually several of the actions that are coming up are related to this because we're going to be looking at finding homes for things you want to get rid of, shopping secondhand. And we're also trying to compile a list of places that will repair things. So I've been putting out some questions on different forums to try to get a list, because I wasn't really able to find one. But anyway, we're looking at repairing, small appliances, small engines, furniture, that sort of thing. So all of that is going to be coming up in some of our actions. And we have posted about Buy Nothing before, but it will be there too in some of our upcoming actions. So please look for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne, for stating that. And yeah, so it's actions like these and campaigns and small initiatives that we do at the local level can really have an impact on how and when we transition to a circular economy. So more people who participate and more people who are aware would really help in this transition. So we do have a question from the chat. It's so difficult. Oops, where is my mouse? Right here. Okay, the question is, what are some of the intervention strategies that can be proposed to increase consumer awareness leaning towards sustainability? Have I observed any changes in consumption patterns in my study as a result of the pandemic? Okay, so intervention strategies for increasing consumer awareness. Yeah, communication and behavioral interventions, like even better signage, really helps. So this, like coming back to the example of recycling, and if there's a local recycling system in place, and communication is really an essential part of making sure that works. So, and another thing about consumer awareness is making like this idea that a transition to like a more sustainable system, like a circular economy, shouldn't really be like voluntary, shouldn't really come from only those who are sustainability motivated or environmentally conscious. It should be like the easy thing or the the go-to option for anybody, like rather than single-use plastics being like the go-to convenience option. Some other, okay, even if it's single use, maybe it's like a completely like a biodegradable food, like a material which we use for like which we use as spoons. And then if there's a system in which that gets automatically like sent to for composting or other forms of degradation, that's how we should make the system work. So it isn't just about the awareness, but more about changing the system to make sure like circular actions are like the default behavior. And that's not just for like individuals, it spans all levels, like businesses, governments. So policies that help make this thing happen, like the extended producer responsibility and plastic bag bans. So everything plays a role. So consumer awareness is important, but that's not just the only thing. And for the second question about changes in the pandemic, well, actually, my study period about furniture reuse in Blacksburg, the actual like quantitative data study started only this summer. So I really don't have the one from the start of the pandemic, but at least from like qualitative observations and with like talking to different members in the community, especially since I was looking at furniture reuse inside Blacksburg, they did say that it was hard to collect like the donations last year, especially because of the pandemic restrictions and different times like students move out of campus. So yes, that did have an impact, but I don't have like a concrete answer for that. Yes.
All of the points that have been made.
Could you come here and talk, please?
All of the points you've raised and that everybody has raised are very important. And at the same time, they are not, the picture is even broader, unfortunately, than we often think of. For example, one of the things that most discourages me is every time I hear anybody talk about how wonderful the interstate traffic system is the way we use motor vehicles. I mean, it's the use of tremendous number of vehicles, however efficiently they are made. And you can recycle practically 100% of a car, but that doesn't change all of the other ways that we are using motor vehicles that are just, it discourages you to think about. So I'm not trying to discourage people by thinking about it, but I guess what I'm encouraging, although it's difficult at an early stage, is that we need to think even more broadly than we are. But thank you.
Definitely. Thank you so much for making that point and emphasizing that. We are close to 1 o'clock. Do we have any more questions online? Or oh, okay, great. Yeah. Hello, I guess.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone online for joining. We try to make this a hybrid event, and yeah, there were some technical difficulties, which in terms of discussion, which we can mitigate like the next time we have such an event. But thank you for being with us as we gave this hybrid event a try.
I realized I should have mentioned that at the beginning, that we had this hybrid.
Yeah.
I'm still learning how this hybrid stuff works.
Right, well, yeah, this is our first, so.
I think